Hello, boys and girls and babes. Welcome back to the Janaea Talks Caps podcast. So, what's up? How are we all doing? I'm guessing we are all doing fan-fucking-tastic because our Washington Capitals are leading the entire NHL with a ridiculous 16-3-4 record and 36 points in the standings already. Which is honestly silly, just silly, in a good way though. It's silly in a good way, in a great way actually, as the Caps are currently on pace for 128 points by season's end. So they're pretty fucking good if you're catching my drift here. The next closest team to them in the league standings is fellow Metropolitan Division squad, the New York Islanders, who have 29 points at the time of recording here. So they're 7 points behind the Caps, or 3.5 games back for any of you baseball or basketball fans out there. The point is, a month and a half into the season, the Caps are starting to run away with it a little bit here. They've been pulling further and further away from the pack, continuing to rack up wins and points at a historic pace. And we could have been a little bit worried that after having our 13-game point streak snapped in an ugly game against the Montreal Canadiens, we could have been worried a little bit because it can seemingly be pretty easy in today's NHL to follow up a long winning streak or a long point streak with an equally long streak of incompetence and losing. Just ask Philadelphia Flyers fans. Their team seems to have a long winning streak every season, and then every season they abruptly follow up the winning streak with a losing streak that's just as long or longer. And then go on to miss the playoffs. So the Buffalo Sabres did it last season as well, winning 10 straight games before Christmas, but then going on to miss the playoffs. So you could also ask them if you want further proof. Anyways, that's what the average NHL team will do. But if you haven't learned by now, our Washington Capitals are not average. So let's talk about it. And yes, aside from one ugly game against Montreal, the Caps have been pretty much perfect for the last month plus now. They had a 13-game point streak with a record of 11-0-2, which dated back to October 16th when they beat the Toronto Maple Leafs. Now referred to, of course, as the Toronto Maple Laughs. The Leafs have lost 6 straight games as of right now, and have just been generally terrible. But anyways, we're not here to talk about the Leafs. So the Washington Capitals, they have been the buzzsaw of the entire National Hockey League ever since. Their last regulation loss before losing to Montreal on November 15th came just over a month before when they lost to the, at the time, undefeated Colorado Avalanche on October 14th. So you could say we've been having a pretty good time of it so far. So yes, a 13-game point streak snapped by the Montreal Canadiens, and honestly, that game probably would have gone a lot differently if Carey Price hadn't made the first saves against Alex Ovechkin in his entire career in the first 10 minutes of the game. Ovi had multiple glorious chances in the first period, which obviously he normally puts straight into the back of the net against every team and every goaltender, but especially against Carey Price, as he has absolutely torched Price in his career. 20 goals in just 25 career games against Carey Price. But this night was one of those rare times where it's just not Ovi's night. And hilariously, I say this even though Ovechkin did get a goal against Price later in the game to start the Capitals' comeback efforts. So that just tells you just how great Alex Ovechkin really is. He scores one goal, but we still say it wasn't his night. So anyways, Price stopped him on all of his chances in the first period. Otherwise, the Caps probably would have had a 3-0 lead before the first period was even finished. But it was not to be on this particular night. Oh well. Everyone has got to lose sometime. You can't go 82-0, although the Caps are spoiling us so much that it almost seems like it could be a possibility for this team. The other problem for the Caps in the game against Montreal was in net, where rookie backup goaltender Ilya Samsonov got the start to give Braden Holtby a night off before a game in Boston the next night. With Holtby on the bench, there was a notable advantage in net for the Canadiens. It kind of sucked, as I always look forward to the Holtby versus Price matchup. Oh well. Holtby obviously has owned both of the Montreal Canadiens and the Boston Bruins throughout his career, so it was kind of a pick whichever night you want to win on situation for Caps head coach Todd Reirden. He chose to win against the Bruins, which the Capitals did with Holtby in net, but Reirden was probably hoping he'd get a better performance out of Samsonov against Montreal, at least a good enough showing to give the team in front of him a chance to win the game. The Caps obviously are comeback kings, but Samsonov dug them a pretty deep hole to try and dig their way out of in this one. It was 4-0 for the Habs before the second period was even over. Anyways, that game turned out to be a clunker, but even with that 13-game point streak being snapped by that game, and even with that loss to Montreal being, decidedly of the ugly variety, a game in which nothing went right for the Caps, and their hard-earned point streak was ruined because of it. Even after all of that, losing in regulation for the first time in over a month, they still went right back to work the very next day and earned a victory in Boston in a game in which they completely outplayed the Atlantic Division leading Bruins, outshooting them 44-23, despite the Bruins playing at home and despite the Bruins having the advantage as far as power play opportunities. So first of all, to not lose a single game in regulation for over a month is just ridiculous in today's NHL, no matter which way you slice it. So let's just call it what it is. It's a ridiculous level of kicking ass. Second of all, to have that streak snapped and then to come back the very next day and get right back to work and right back to your winning ways against a team that has also been very good this season. Like I said, the Bruins are leading the Atlantic Division. To bounce right back like that shows a lot of character and a killer instinct. It would have been easy to rest on your laurels after a 13-game point streak when you're first place in the entire NHL, and to take that second night of the back-to-back off from work there in Boston. But that's not what the Caps did. They're never satisfied. They're never resting on their laurels. They always want to be better and better every single day. It's one of the things I love about this team, and so they played a great game in Boston and got another win. For the Bruins, as far as they're concerned, as far as the Bruins are concerned, they have to be just hoping and praying to the hockey gods that the Caps will get knocked out of the playoffs sometime before the Bruins have to face them. The Bruins do not want to see these Washington Capitals in the playoffs, I can guarantee you that. For the Caps, if you're going to the Eastern Conference Final, there is no team you would rather face than the Boston Bruins. The Bruins are your bitch. You've beaten them 15 out of the last 16 times, dating back 5 years to 2014. You're taking all of their mothers out for a nice seafood dinner and then never calling them again. So it's got to be fun if you're a Washington Capital, and it's got to be terrifying if you're a Boston Bruin. It's complete dominance on the part of the Caps. The highlight of this game, though, was probably not even the win itself. No, the highlight had to be Brad Marchand taking a cheap shot at Michael Kempny after the whistle, only for Marchand to skate away backwards before Kempny could retaliate. But Marchand was not getting away from Tom Wilson on this one, as Big Willie saw enough, and so he came flying into the picture to attack Marchand. And I do have to say, I have never seen anyone turtle faster than Marchand did here. Yes, Marchand predictably attempted to duck out of the way rather than answer for his antics, ultimately cowering behind the official until the coast was clear. Go figure. Anyways, we own Boston, so not really paying much attention to what Brad Marchand wants to do out there other than just to laugh at him. Following the Caps' scheduled win in Boston, they made the trip back home to take on the Anaheim Ducks at Capital One Arena. And boy, was this a crazy and fun game if you're a fan of the home team, which you probably are since you're listening to this podcast. Either that or you're just a fan of me, in which case, thank you very much. The Ducks, the Caps, beat the Ducks 5-2, which would have been fun enough on its own, but our Capitals, sensing that us fans might be becoming a tad bit bored with the multi-goal wins, given that we're seeing so many of them, they decided to spice things up a bit against the Ducks. So already leading 2-0 in the game, the Caps decided to hammer home their point physically as well as on the scoreboard. And already always a very physical team in general, the Caps ratcheted up the physicality even more, with Brendan Leipsic sparking a literal melee in the second period. Here's how it went down. So the Caps had been hard on the forecheck all game. They've been hard on the forecheck all season, and this game was no different. They've been forcing opposition teams into committing turnovers using their speed, their physicality, their great positioning, and their overall aggressive play. And it's been working beautifully. Again, they've been doing it all season, and this game was no different. So with the Caps on the forecheck in the Anaheim defensive zone and the Ducks having already taken a few cheap shots at Brendan Leipsic, Leipsic decided he'd had enough. He skated in and absolutely nailed a Ducks defender with a clean hit. The referee was standing right there and did not even flinch because it was clean as a whistle, even though the duck went flying, no pun intended. Then, not yet satisfied, Leipsic circled back around and came in again, landing another bone-crushing hit on another Ducks defender. This one was also clean, with the referee again standing right there and not even flinching towards his whistle. He was not even thinking about calling a penalty. Clean as Monica Geller's apartment on Friends. The Ducks, however, no doubt tired of being absolutely embarrassed all over the ice, they decided to have some sort of a problem with the hit, and 3 of them converged on Leipsic. So Leipsic, he fights back, and as 3 Ducks are all worried about getting some type of perceived revenge on Leipsic behind the net instead of focusing on the actual hockey game, the Caps players continued playing hockey, and Garnet Hathaway fed the puck, turned over by the Ducks, by the way, on yet another hard forecheck by the Caps. Hathaway fed the puck out front to a wide-open Chandler Stevenson in the slot, who had about 3 days to decide where he wanted to shoot it, and he made no mistake with it, beating John Gibson for the 3-0 goal. So given that the referees were nowhere near calling a penalty on what was going on behind the net, they were just letting the boys sort it out themselves. There was no reason why the goal would not count. And so count it did. 3-0 for the Caps. The Ducks, no doubt displeased by their own incompetence, continued trying to take it out on the smallest player on the Caps, Brendan Leipsic, even after the Caps had scored. Now, the Caps are a team that always stands up for each other, and so predictably, total chaos is what ensued. Every guy on the ice, with the exception of the goaltenders, was in on this line brawl, and after Garnet Hathaway had already taken down 1 Duck and beat his ass to a bloody pulp, that is when Erik Gudbranson decided to try his luck against Hathaway. But the officials, inexplicably, instead of letting them fight, the officials got in the way of it and started trying to separate them with 0 success, to the surprise of no one. And here is a perfect example of why officials getting in the way of fights and trying to protect certain players from shit that player wanted, from shit that player started. Here's exactly why officials doing this is problematic. Instead of just letting Hathaway and Gudbranson fight and settle it themselves like men, the officials intervene and tie up Hathaway, and the result is Hathaway takes multiple sucker punches by Gudbranson straight to his head. Hathaway's arms are tied up by the officials, so there's nothing he can do about it other than take it right on the chin, and this is ridiculous. How is this saving anybody from a concussion or other head injury? And now, instead of a fair fight where both players can protect themselves, you have one guy throwing sucker punches at another while that other guy's arms are tied up by the officials. It's just ridiculous. And what can you do if you're Hathaway? You certainly can't do anything to get yourself out of the officials' grasp, because God only knows what happens to you if you accidentally pop a ref or a linesman in the mouth while you're trying to get yourself free to protect yourself. So you really can't do anything. Hathaway, though, decided that what he should do is spit in Gudbranson's face as Gudbranson was throwing sucker punches. So let me start by saying I can't really say that I blame Hathaway really at all. As Goodbranson, like I said, he was being a coward here, throwing sucker punch after sucker punch after sucker punch. But I also cannot condone spitting in someone's face. It's not really called for in any circumstance, no matter how much of a cowardly joke that opposing player is. Even if you don't respect the guy, don't spit in his face, please. So it was a regrettable decision by Hathaway, one that earned him a match penalty, even though the actual rule calls for just a game misconduct. But there was no complaining by any of the Caps about the calls by the officials, instead deciding to let that slide and just own the supplemental discipline that is likely on the way as a result of the match penalty, which for those who don't know, a match penalty is an automatic suspension unless it is rescinded by the league. And Hathaway himself took full ownership of the play after the game, saying that he's not that type of guy, his emotions got the better of him, and there's no place for that type of retaliation in the league or in the sport. I agree with him on all points. He is not that type of guy. His emotions did get the better of him, and there is no place for that type of stuff in the sport of hockey. But I can easily forgive him because I know what type of a dude Hathaway is, and he's a good one. His coach, Todd Reardon, also agreed with him on all points, and Reardon also said it's easy for him to forgive him given Garnett's track record as a player, as a teammate, and as a human being. Reardon spoke very highly of Hathaway in his media availability following the incident, citing the fact that Garnett has consistently been a great dude, that it's a regrettable instance where Hathaway's emotions got the better of him, and that no one feels worse about the incident and no one is more disgusted by it than Garnett Hathaway is. Reardon also shared that while Hathaway had no obligation to get in front of the media afterwards, Garnett wanted to do so because he wanted to take full ownership of the incident and say from his own lips that it was the wrong thing to do. So he took full ownership of it. He regrets it a lot, and I believe him. And so since I believe him, and since he was so sincere in his regret about the incident, I'm choosing to move on. That's good enough for me. Everybody does stupid shit. The guys who drive you nuts are the ones who do the stupid shit and then take absolutely no ownership of it and show absolutely no remorse for it. So Hathaway obviously is not one of those guys. He takes full responsibility for it, and it's obvious that he regrets it a lot. You could tell that he feels pretty bad about it. So like I said, I'm moving on. Hope you all will too. So anyways, we still had a hockey game to finish after all of this, and the Ducks, you'd think they would be fired up coming into the third period, down 3-0 and just generally being manhandled all over the ice. But no, it would be the Caps who would score first in the period once again. This time it was Jakub Vrana who would clean up his own rebound to make it 4-0 for the Caps. How good has Jakub Vrana been? Really since the 2018 playoffs, where he had multiple game-winning goals for the Caps, en route, of course, to the Caps winning the Stanley Cup. But especially this season, where he's on pace to obliterate his previous career highs, which he had just set last season. He's on pace for 36 goals and 64 points this season. He had 24 goals and 47 points last season, which was his second full season in the NHL. And when you look at Jakub Vrana, that's the thing about Jakub Vrana. He's still so young, just 23 years old, and yet he's already gained so much valuable experience with the Caps. Of course, going deep in the playoffs and winning the Stanley Cup as a 22-year-old. He's got such a young heart and a young enthusiasm, and yet he's got such a mature work ethic. He's the first guy on the ice and the last guy off of the ice at every single practice. And given that, he's naturally super talented, blessed obviously with blazing speed and a wicked shot, when you combine that with the work ethic that Vrana has, the sky really is the limit for the kid, affectionately nicknamed Jake the Snake. He's setting new career highs every year, and he just keeps getting better and better and better and better and better and better. So if you can't tell, I really love this player, and I'm super excited that he's likely going to be ours for the long haul. Anyways, back to the game against the Ducks. It would end in a 5-2 score for the Caps. But like I said, the real highlight is how this team always sticks up for one another. This game was just yet another example of that. And this is exactly the culture that got them the Stanley Cup in 2018. and it's exactly the culture that has them, well on their way to winning a fourth President's Trophy in the Ovechkin era. One of the best parts, too, is that while most of the Capitals players are literal behemoths, they're the biggest and heaviest team in the NHL, but even the smallest guy on the team, Braden Leipsic, plays as if he's 10 feet tall and weighs 500 pounds. He, too, is a total badass who will drop you on your ass, and he certainly showed it in spades against the Ducks with his 2 monster hits on that one shift leading directly to a Caps goal. And a 3-0 lead for the good guys, as he had the Ducks really so distracted trying to go after him that they forgot how to hockey while the Caps put the puck past Gibson. So it was really a beautiful sequence of events. I can't emphasize it enough. I just loved everything about this play from Leipsic. So yes, the game against the Ducks was really one of those, we'll beat you on the scoreboard, but we will also beat your ass. Reminders from the Caps to every other team in the league. And I loved it. I love that they play this way. I love, just the way that they go about their business out there. And they're doing it, peak performance right now. So speaking of beating teams on the scoreboard, the Washington Capitals are the NHL's highest scoring team, and it's not even close. The Caps have scored 89 times already this season through just 23 games, good for first in the league. The second place team has scored 15 fewer goals than the Caps have, so like I said, it's not even close. The Caps are leading in the goal scoring department by a wide margin, just like they're leading in the standings by a wide margin. And of course, the power play for the Capitals is always a huge threat and a huge concern for other teams, as the Caps always do a lot of damage on their power play. But where they're really chewing teams up and spitting them out this season is at even strength. The Caps have already scored a whopping 65 times at even strength, which again is first in the NHL by a wide margin. They're scoring nearly three even strength goals per game. That is just ridiculous. There's plenty of teams in the NHL that don't score 3 goals per game, period. Power plays and everything all included. So it's really just ridiculous when you think about it that the Washington Capitals are scoring nearly 3 goals at even strength every single game. It's been an insane first quarter and a bit of the season that the Caps have put up. 30 as well. 30 also appears to be the new 20 in terms of goal scoring, as most teams around the NHL usually tout, how many 20 goal scorers they have in their lineups. That's usually the mark that you look for. And generally speaking, if you have 5 20 goal scorers, you're probably set up pretty well and doing pretty damn good as a team. The Caps, however, are on pace to have 6 30-goal scorers this season. So they have 6 guys right now who are on pace to eclipse the 30-goal mark. Alex Ovechkin obviously is one of them. He's on pace to do a lot more than that. He's on pace for over 50 goals again this season. But as well, Evgeny Kuznetsov, TJ Oshie, Jakub Vrana, Tom Wilson, and future Norris Trophy winner John Carlson. Which, by the way, let's do a quick check-in on future Norris Trophy winner John Carlson. And he's still on pace to smash the 100-point mark this season, as he's got 35 points in just 23 games so far, which puts him on pace for a whopping 125 points by regular season's end, which is just flat out ridiculous. It'd be ridiculous for anyone, but it's especially ridiculous considering that he is a defenseman, for crying out loud. This type of season from a defenseman, we have not seen it in my lifetime. If he does it, if he eclipses 100 points in a single season, he will be just the 5th defenseman in over 100 years of NHL history to do so. Do you know how many defensemen have played this game over the course of the last 100 plus years? So not bad at all, Johnny. Not bad at all. Among the many things helping the Caps to be so successful right now, one of them certainly is Braden Holtby. wanted to touch on him as well because Holtby, he has not lost in regulation in his last 11 games. He is 10-0-1 over that span. The last time that he did lose in regulation was 12 games ago when he was pulled after allowing 3 goals in quick succession to the Colorado Avalanche, all the way back on October 14th, well over a month ago now. So again, touched on it earlier in the episode, but the Colorado Avalanche were obviously still undefeated at that point. They were a really good team. They still are a really good team, but they have quite a few guys injured right now. But the point being, they're no slouch. There's certainly no slouch offensively. You know, with Nathan McKinnon, they had Mikko Rantanen, Gabriel Landeskog, all these guys. The list goes on and on and on. So, you know, it's a tough game under any circumstance against the Colorado Avalanche, but for Holtby, he wasn't really playing that well to start the season, so certainly it was a tough matchup for him. So since he was pulled in that game, it was after that game actually that he and the coaching staff together mutually agreed that he needed to take a little bit of a quote-unquote reset to get his game back to where it should be. So not only to where the coaching staff feels that his game should be, but to where Braden Holtby feels that his game should be as well. So they mutually agreed upon it. That's what they decided to do. And so they gave Samsonov the next start. Holtby took a few days off to regroup. And when he got that next start a few days later against the New York Rangers, he won the game, and he has not lost in regulation ever since, winning 10 of his last 11 games, the only blemish an overtime loss in Edmonton to the Oilers. And in addition to simply the wins, which are obviously the biggest, most important thing, but personally for Holtby, he's also sporting a nearly .930 save percentage over his last 11 games. 930. So that's pretty damn good. The thing with Braden Holtby is that he has amazing character, right? Which is why I never doubt him. He's so strong mentally that it gives him amazing bounce back ability. He's always been able to bounce back successfully and consistently. So no one at this point should be surprised by it because he's always shown that character, and as a result, he's always shown that ability and propensity for bouncing back when he needs to. And like I said, he's done it consistently throughout his career, never wavering, right from the time when he was an as yet unproven rookie, up until right now. So this season. And so there's really no reason to think that that's going to change anytime soon. He's so good. He doesn't need to, bounce back often. But when he does need to, he does it successfully every time. The most recent and obvious example, of course, was the 2018 playoffs versus the Columbus Blue Jackets. But also, as far back as when he was a rookie, getting called up to be the starter for the Caps in the 2012 playoffs because the Caps' top 2 goalies at the time both got injured right before the playoffs were going to start. And so he had to get called up, and he had to take on the, at the time, defending Stanley Cup champion Boston Bruins. So right from that time and on into the next season as well, there was a huge period of time when he had never lost back-to-back games in his career. So it was that bounce-back ability by Holtby that allowed the Caps to knock out the defending Stanley Cup champion Bruins in the 2012 playoffs against really all odds at the time. So it's been a trend for Holtby ever since, ever since he first came into the league as a rookie, and it's continued, like I said, throughout his entire career and up until right now, this moment. So throughout his whole career so far, he almost never loses 2 games in a row. It's really something special, and it's helped the Caps to be a juggernaut over this last decade here. So I have no doubt that will continue. Again, he's so talented and he's so good that it's not very often that he needs to bounce back from anything, because normally he's just playing really, really well. But, on the rare occasions that, he does have a little bit of a rough stretch and he needs to bounce back, he's always able to do it, and to do it successfully. So anyways, there's just one more thing that I wanted to talk about during today's episode, and that is Travis Boyd, and by extension, Richard Panik. So with how good with how good Travis Boyd has been this season and last season whenever he's been called upon. And let me tell you, if you somehow haven't noticed how good he's been in limited ice time, he's in the bottom 6, of course, so the ice time isn't huge. And so maybe he's not among the league's leading scorers or anything. But to give you an idea of just how good he's been, when you look at points per 60 minutes among players with at least an hour of 5-on-5 ice time this season, Travis Boyd leads the NHL. He leads the entire NHL in points per 60 minutes with 5.13 points per 60 minutes of play. He also leads the entire NHL in assists per 60 with 4.1 assists per 60 minutes of play. So, point of the story being, this guy is a good hockey player. He's a good NHL player. So with that in mind, now, by extension, Richard Panik, do we really need Richard Panik at a $2.75 million cap hit? That's my question to you. And let me preface all of this by saying that this is something that I had planned to talk about before Panik finally scored his first goal as a Washington Capital the other night against the Anaheim Ducks. And it was a nice goal, and hopefully it'll get him going. He's certainly been, getting a lot more scoring chances as of late, ever since he returned from injury. And listen, I know Panik is a more proven NHL player. He's scored 20-plus goals in a season in this league before. But so far this season, the dude has 1 goal. He had no points at all, zippy, no goals, no assists, entering that game against the Ducks, which was his 13th game as a Washington Capital. So obviously, the way that you want to start out with a new team is not to go pointless through your first 12 games. And obviously, he's not producing the way you or I or the Capitals coaches or Panik himself would like. He needs to be better. I guarantee you he knows that. We do not need to tell him. But meanwhile, Travis Boyd has been amazing. And he only makes $800,000 compared to Panik's $2.75 million. So the argument for Boyd over Panik can definitely be made. In addition to their respective performances, or lack thereof in Panik's case, on the ice, the added flexibility with the salary cap that such a move would provide would certainly be welcomed by the Capitals at this point as well. So, you could use that extra cash to help with certain pressing matters, such as a couple of studs by the names of Nicholas Backstrom and Braden Holtby. So personally, I think Panik can be a very effective player. So I think you give him until the trade deadline to figure it out with his new team. And if it's still not working, then at that point you look to move him because look, it's not a very big sample size at all for Panik right now with the Caps. With the injury that he endured, he's still only played 13 games with the Capitals. And like I said, hopefully getting his first goal and his first point with his new team the other night, hopefully that'll be a turning point for him because we know he can be a good player. So you don't want to jump to conclusions and certainly don't want to jump the gun on a deal to move him elsewhere. You want to give him some time to get used to and more than that, get comfortable in the Capitals system. And me, certainly, I'd like to see a bigger sample size from him before drawing any conclusions. But it is very comforting for sure to know that the Caps have played extremely well as an entire team when he's been out of the lineup, with that injury. They really haven't missed him at all. And so, yes, if Panik is going to play up to his capabilities, then he does make this team even better and even tougher to deal with for the opponents. But if he's not going to be playing up to his capabilities, then it's comforting to know that you can take him out of this lineup and really not miss a beat at all because a guy like Travis Boyd has proved so capable. And in that case, it's better to cut ties with Panik in a trade and save the cap space, especially when Boyd is outplaying him by a wide margin anyway. So again, I still want to see a bigger sample size from him, from Richard Panik, but if things stay the same through February, I'd be looking to trade him. And overall, like I said, it's very comforting to know that we have such great and capable players readily available in Hershey to step up anytime we need them to. Like looking at Travis Boyd, for example, he would be a regular in the NHL lineup for most teams. So it's a luxury that the Capitals have, with the Caps, of course, being very deep at every position. And that's a compliment, obviously, to our scouting and development departments, as they do an amazing job and have been for many years. Anyways, that's pretty much all that I wanted to talk about for today. Thank you all so much for listening, and please don't forget to subscribe to our show if you haven't already. It's available on Apple, on Spotify, on iHeartRadio, on Google Podcasts, on Stitcher, and pretty much just anywhere and everywhere that you can imagine that you can get your podcast from. We're on everywhere. So don't forget to subscribe. And as far as the Caps, they're in the Big Apple tonight to play the Wednesday night rivalry game against the New York Rangers. It's always a treat watching the Caps do Broadway. So here's to a good show and hopefully another 2 points for the good guys. Until next time, Caps fans, stay classy and let's go Caps!